America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. Usually I come to you on Thursday afternoons. I'm going to give you a special Monday show because people are screwing up how to interpret Kanye West or Ye and Deion Sanders' move and the link between them. And I think I can clarify this in a nice little short video. And it would be good for the nation because, make no mistake, the standing script is that Hitler is some bad, uniquely bad individual, and the ideology that supported him is uniquely bad and is uniquely evil. But that's not the case. It's actually... There is a movement. It's part of a movement. Part of the movement started in the United States, especially when you research the history of the anti-miscegenation laws in Germany and the laws against blood citizen and the citizenship laws that denied black people their rights, right? So there is, if you put it as uniquely bad and distinct from anything American, then you don't see how the same ideology still works in America, and you don't understand that our American genocidal maniacs are similarly disposed, and the culture that supported them is similarly disposed as the culture that supported the Nazis and Hitler, right? So if you draw a distinction between someone like Andrew Jackson and Hitler, I think that's a false distinction. They share more similarities than they are differences. Andrew Jackson wanted to, he led the charge to exterminate Native Americans and make sure that wanted slavery to stay in the States. And if you don't understand that, one, plantations were concentration camps and death camps insofar as black life was utterly disposable, and the minute you became inconvenient, they just put you down like a dog. That was what they were, right? And I don't think we understand the affinity between American culture and Nazi culture, and that if it were the case that black people had a disproportionate amount of influence in very central sectors like finance and the production of culture and academics, then there would be death camps with black people in them, right? The whites would get nervous. Anytime black people get a little bit of power at the community level, the whites get nervous. And you say, Army, how can you say that? And, I could bring up Tulsa, right? Tulsa 26 and the history of the U.S. pogroms in the United States. And there are black towns in black neighborhoods in Georgia, where I am right now, that are underwater because, white people, wiped them out. The blacks became too uppity in some way or another. The list of massacres is legion, and black people wiped them out, and white people wiped them out, right? So the idea that genocide isn't in the American culture is false, right? And that the Nazis and Hitler is somehow uniquely bad in the history of America. We got Leopold, we got Churchill starving Indians, the Indian from India, Hindus from India. It's part of Truman. What Truman did in North Korea, they incinerated entire not just townships, swaths of the state without regard. And that was a war Korea was a war we entered by choice because we didn't want the Soviets to get a W in their proxy war. So we just decided to incinerate Koreans. Weren't that great to South Koreans either, but we just incinerated North Koreans. And that was a full ego war. That was and then it metastasized into Vietnam, right? So this idea that genocide is a uniquely German thing kind of degrades both the pre-genocidal impetus that was in America that allowed, that gave Hitler kind of the ideas and the mechanisms to codify that racial degradation, and also it degrades the abject atrocities that were, chattel slavery, right? So, and what that means is that Black people in the United States now are mandated to learn that awful white genocidal maniacs have both sides. That's the song that Black people, that's the dance that the whites make Black people dance. Awful genocidal white maniacs. They're both sides to the situation. They had to preserve, if you talk to other colonialized people, that the British always give the example, well, they built roads and trains. Don't mind the abject colonialism and degradation and extermination. They built roads and trains. In America, that's like Black people are forced to participate in rituals that honor white genocidal maniacs, right? And if you say, what do you mean, Amy? Well, think about an HBCU, Jackson State University, named for Andrew Jackson, the same genocidal maniac who exterminated Native Americans, and on one hand, and exterminated argued for slavery across the land on the other, and was very serious about his white supremacy. So there's a way in which part of what it is to be a Black American is to be forced to let white people decide who you're allowed to like and how you're allowed to like them and who you're not. I'm going to talk a little bit about this and draw a tighter bead on the situation after I hit the intro.
To the beat, y'all. Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front. To the beat, y'all. Yeah.
All right, so it would be a little bit strange if you just saw a random, proud Jewish person wearing a Hitler State University sweatshirt. It'd be a little bit strange because you would think that, a proud Jewish person wouldn't have anything to do with honoring Adolf Hitler. But yet, Jackson State University, that was an HBCU. Now, that's not a name or a man that Black people chose to honor. It was a name of a man that white people chose to honor. And it's not an accident that the Black people in Jackson are so degraded. White people determine everything about their life, including the cleanliness of their water. That's determined by a Klan state legislature who may be different than the Nazis in Germany, or most likely not, because they're not really threatened by the Black people. If Black Mississippi actually had control of the education institutions, or a prominent presence in the education institutions, prominent independent autonomous presence in the education institutions, the cultural institutions, and the finance and banking institutions in Mississippi, there would be death camps in Mississippi. But we don't, because the whites don't have to. The whites don't have to. They're not threatened. They are not duly threatened by Black Mississippians. If they were, we would have a different discourse. But they're not. This is why, this is why the Reconstruction ended, because we realized that the whites weren't going to give up their racism. And so the North decided, well, let the whites have their racism. Sorry, Blacks. We want to do business with these folks. And that was how Reconstruction ended, and that's a problem. But it put Black people in a position where we always have to both sides awful genocidal, white figures. Now, Kanye does a riff on that. He plays jazz with the American tune by both siding Hitler, right? As if it's some sort of random occurrence that he emerged in power, and such as in Germany, right? So, Kanye is wrong about the microphones and the highways. Those were invented, in different ways. But he doesn't read books, right? He's right about the impetus to both sides, the casual impetus to both sides, awful genocidal white figures because that's part of the Black American experience. That is what it is to learn that, like, well, you know, Jefferson might have done this, but he also did this. Madison might have done this, but, you know, he also pushed for slaves to out of slavery all across the United States. But, you know, they got to both sides, these guys, when they're actually pretty awful. They're awful. And they were knowingly awful and knowingly genocidal. And part of our America culture is that we decided that that was okay for the relative perks. And Black people are determined, not externally determined, that means externally forced to honor that compromise and those compromised figures. And then we extend that largesse to compromised figures outside of the United States. And that's and Kanye, that's what Kanye does. He extends that largesse to compromised figures outside of the United States. And like I said, I don't think the guy doesn't read books. I don't think he's right on the particulars. But the sentiment is very familiar because every time you see someone in every time you see someone proudly standing by, you know, Jackson State, or even Americans like with the flag, it's the same sort of kind of like trying to see the good out of awful people. And honestly, you know, Kanye is very big about being Christian. He's honestly Christian. And this idea that he's not allowed to say, I love Nazis, and I love Jews, and I love Zionists, and I love Hitler, he's not allowed to say that, means that some Christians are not really serious about being Christian, because loving your neighbor, loving your enemy doesn't just mean loving your enemy, it means loving your enemy. So Kanye is saying that he loves your enemy, but he loves you too. And you're saying he's not allowed to say that. And I'm saying that might not be the most Christian attitude that you to have. And it's okay if you don't love your enemy, but you really should be very suspicious of saying that Kanye can't love your enemy as long as he says he loves you too. And he says it. You just have a problem with Kanye loving your enemy. And that, depending on who you talk to, might be more about you than it is about Kanye, right? And it's definitely not necessarily or obviously Christian, right? So Kanye, he has his problems, and like he's wrong on the facts, and like I don't care about mental illness, but what he is off script, and there are so few Black people who are off script. He's not on the GOP script. He's not on the Dem script, and there's so few Black people with prominent microphones, stable microphones, who are allowed to be off script. It's really kind of refreshing, and it opens up the degradation of that America heaps onto Black people, right? So if you're saying like, well, he denied the Holocaust. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a way in which that's what he did. There's also a way in which when Barack Obama flies into Flint, Michigan, and takes a sip of water, he's doing a different kind of gaslighting and says, well, the water's clean now, then flies right back out, probably get the stomach pumped. I don't know. Goes on dialysis. But there is a way, and we have reports today that the water still isn't clean in Flint. So there's a way in which this gaslighting is par for the course. And we need to not just otherize it as uniquely bad and part of the Nazi ideology, as opposed to like just an awful part of being in America. And now what I think is virtuous about this whole struggle is that there's no way you're going to redeem Hitler. And that's not how this discourse goes. And like that's too entrenched. What it can do is bring America appropriately and right size America's esteem for itself. And when we come to understand that we're no better than the Nazis, it's just that our enemy is like degraded. Before on Twitter, I wrote that there are two ways, like there's a way in which Hitler was more impressive because he had to take a population that was in power and then like churn up the roots of anti-Semitism and formalize it and then exact it. Whereas American presidents, they don't have to do that. You have built a racial hierarchy, a country that's like built on racial hierarchy from the top down and from the bottom up. So American So whereas Hitler was driving a Model T, and, Leopold was on a horse, Hitler was out driving a Model T, American presidents just have to walk in and press, start. They're like driving a Prius. The Prius of racism. It's easy because everyone's so comfortable with black degradation and, the permanence of it. I mean, we live in a country of, a capitalist country where black people don't own anything. So pretty much, our life is determined by the people who own stuff, and we don't own stuff. So, and the moment we did start owning stuff, that would make it very interesting. One of the reasons why there isn't a broader push for reparations is that people know that if black people actually had a fair share of resources and capital and the means to protect their resources and capital and power, the South, we might have another civil war, because that means whites would have to give up something. Power is a zero-sum game. Black people would be able to say no. In a way that the whites would feel like is an affront to their quality of life and way of life, and that would either end in the GOP taking over government and then instituting death camps, or it would end in a civil war, or there's a 40% chance that it would go smoothly. But I'm in Georgia right now, and I'll tell you right now, it would not. Black people are a third of Georgia. Black people having a third of the land and power and discretionary resources would not go over very well with the whites, who are used to running things without actually having to accommodate too many independent black voices. By the way, if you appreciate anything I'm saying, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50, because you're not going to find this too many other places. But I want to draw down the link between Ye and Deion Sanders, and it is in Jackson, Mississippi, named after Andrew Jackson, a school of people who are duty-bound to honor a genocidal maniac. Duty-bound to honor a genocidal maniac, because that's who the whites wanted for the black school, for the black town that ended up with a black school. Jackson. Right? That's also the black town that can't even control its water because the white Mississippi legislature that is still based in that town doesn't really care if black people have clean water, and wants to punish the black mayor of that black town in any way that the state legislature can. Right? So now, if black people had more self-determination, there would be a war. There would be a war, and it might end in camps or it might end in a genocide, but they don't. So, we don't have to know, the whites don't have to express personally how committed they are to the racial hierarchy in the way that the Nazis did, because black people don't have any power. They don't have, they wear their Jackson state. They wear their Jackson. They have to tell themselves a story about why they have to wear their Jackson State University sweatshirt with pride in their genocidal maniac, for whom the whites named their school after. So this notion that the Nazis are had a uniquely evil ideological disposition is actually, not only is it empirically false, it actually confuses the space and the rhetoric we need to get from here to racial justice. And it confuses the quality of whites who we've let decide what counts as baby and bathwater. Because when I say that, you have to appreciate Andrew Jackson, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but you can throw out Hitler because he's bathwater. Maybe Ye doesn't want to let you decide what's baby and what's bathwater. And why are you so comfortable with the distinctions that white people have given you about what counts as baby and what counts as bathwater? Right? So Jackson State University, degraded conditions. Prime went to Colorado, University of Colorado, where there's going to be clean water and everything he touches works. Because if you've been around too many black institutions, because they're made by, a degraded poor, people who carry a lot of liabilities, not everything works the way it should. I suspect that Jackson State has roaches in a way that maybe CU Boulder doesn't. Everything's going to be nice. Everything's going to work the first time. You flip a switch, things are just going to happen. In a way that maybe flights are just going to happen, in a way that maybe they don't happen when you're at Jackson State University. And, you know, Deion Sanders isn't like Obama. He didn't take a public service job. His job was to go there and win football games. He won a lot of football games and brought in a lot of money, and now he's leaving to a better job for him. Now, Obama had a public service job, so when he sold out the entire struggle for a Netflix job and for a Netflix deal and a book deal and a house in the Hamptons, that's a bigger deal because that was a public service racket. Deion's job was to turn an HBCU into a dominant football powerhouse, and he did that. And so, you know, they both got a lot out of each other. Whereas the relationship between the black community and Obama is more markedly one-sided, right? So in thinking about Kanye, you have to think about a few things. You have to think about how other people think that they get to police who he likes. We have to hate the white people that white people want us to hate. We have to hate Trump. Kanye's like, no, what if I want to like Trump? And we have to like... And we can't like the white people that other white people tell us we can't like. We can't like Hitler. But we have to like Madison. We have to like Jackson. We have to be honored, and we have to like represent them as part of America. So he can like that control over black feeling that Kanye is playing with is actually very important. He's off script. The last person I saw off script like this was, like I said before, Cynthia McKinney. And we know what happened to her. She went to obscurity. They didn't like a free Negro. Kanye, you can say, well, he's not crazy. He's not sane. He's not smart. Yeah, but he's off script. So I'll take the guy who's not like, who doesn't read books and, you know, may have a mental illness, but is off script. I think he might be more useful for this time in America than someone like Barack Obama, who reads books, comes out with a book list, and is very much on script as he told you that Flint's water is clean and that there is nothing he could do about, like, you know, reparations. Right? So think about how Deion, if you have a little homework, think about, in your mind, think about how Deion Sanders at Jackson State University, and named for Andrew Jackson, a genocidal maniac, and homicidal, the guy was doing, a genocidal maniac, and Kanye West, who is now being tarred for praising, for both siding a genocidal maniac they have in common. Like, Deion Sanders is being pilloried for not committing to an institution named for a genocidal maniac. And Kanye is being pilloried for saying that there's something to be said for, you know, a genocidal maniac. And that's the black position right now. Like, that's the dance black people have to have. We have to like the white people, that the genocidal maniacs that white people tell us to like, or at least be okay with that's it. We have to be okay with the genocidal maniacs white people tell us to be okay with. And we have to be upset at the genocidal maniacs and not be okay with the genocidal maniacs that white people tell us we can't be okay with. And we have to pretend, because, and this is something that there's a certain ethnic group / religion that needs the Nazis to be uniquely bad. And pushes that angle in a way that distorts our entire discourse around what constitutes an evil culture. Right? And because the Nazis being uniquely evil doesn't allow us to say that actually Americans are evil in the same way. But the thing is, Americans are evil in the same way. And that's the discourse we need to have if we're going to deal with our own issues at home. But once again, if you like if you appreciate what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50. And the only reason, like I said, I suspect the only reason we don't see more death camps, I mean, we had them, a lot of bombs and pogroms in the United States. The only reason is because the nation is already structured, antecedently structured to subordinate black people. So there is no real challenge at the community level to white power. I mean, Obama got elected by saying, I'm not going to challenge white power. There is no such thing as white power. Right. And so that's where we are. And I vehemently argue against the notion that black feelings should be controlled as a matter of a white project. Kanye gets to have it's complicated relationship with if Kanye has to have it's complicated relationship, is mandated to have it's complicated relationship with the white founding fathers, then he can have it's complicated relationship with Hitler, right? So, whereas Kaepernick kneeled because he didn't want to represent the United States, and that was uncalled for. Kanye is on the other side. He's tippy-toeing. He's saying that, like, well, bad things the United States do, there's something to be said for that, and, both sides, and bad things other people. So, like, he's too far into it, and he's not into that middle that white America, that kind of pathological middle that white America needs of black people. So Kanye was on his tippy toes with the American flag and praising the genocidal cultures of, kind of modern capitalist democracy. And Kaepernick was on his knees, took a knee, and neither one of those are fit for the status quo of black degradation, which is what all of the haters on both sides just want to promote, the status quo of black degradation. Right, so Kanye gets to think that he gets to have it's complicated relationship with Hitler. If you think that we get to have it's complicated relationship with Andrew Jackson. And if you don't think we get to have it's complicated relationship with Andrew Jackson, what are you doing spending money with his name on it? What are you doing supporting Jackson State? Well, it's because you have it's complicated relationship with Andrew Jackson. So you get to keep your relationship, Kanye gets to keep his. And anyone who tells you that that's not okay, well, they just want to police your feelings in a way that's not exactly consistent with racial justice or the truth about the degradation black chattel slaves have suffered, right? And they want to tell you what's baby and what's bathwater. And I'm saying that, like, well, you get to decide. You get to decide. All right, thank you for your time. I will see you on Thursday with a completely different show. Peace.